Okay, good morning, guys. Special appearance by Eddie. Very rare. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. And in just a few moments, about 3 minutes, we'll get the meeting underway. Okay. All right. Eddie's so much bigger than Peach. He's got this distinctive white, like, chest and belly. Hi, Elif. How's it going? Hi, Steven. Hi, Julia, Kylie, everybody else. Welcome back. And there he goes. Okay, hi there, Dimitri, Ryan, Nina, everybody else. Good morning. Just another minute or so. Eloise, Janyan, good to see all you guys. Noah, Amanda, hey there. Okay then, well, now it's 9 a.m., so thanks as usual, guys, for being here today, this morning. It's my birthday, so birthday review session, birthday party for me. Just kidding, but yeah, it is my birthday. So anyway, though, good to be with all you guys today on the day of my birth, and obviously we have a review session to get into. So it's part 2 of the review session. Thanks everybody for your birthday well wishes. I guess it is pretty happy so far anyway. But yeah, it's just review time. So overall, all you need to do is just hit me with your questions about the study guide, and then me and your other classmates will try and come up with some information to help you think about the right type of response. Yes, it is key lime. I just got that flavor yesterday. I don't always see it, so I had to jump on it. But anyways, guys, let's see. Questions. Steven, you're calling out 19 and 31. So let's go ahead and look at those two, I guess, to start. All right, guys. So basically try to have your review sheet pulled up so that you're aware of which questions that we're talking about. But Steven asks about, first of all, number 19. And what number 19 says is, explain 2 reasons that Clifford gives why it is wrong to have a credulous character. Okay, so if this question were selected, first thing you'd have to do is, of course, say what a credulous character even is, and then you'd have to tell me the reasons that the author thinks that it's bad to have one. So let's just try and get that out there. Who could give a summary statement of what it is to have a so-called credulous character? If you're thinking of the essay of Clifford, it's the one, the Ethics of Belief, the one that involves the ship owner, okay, the busted ship. So what's a credulous character, though? Just let me know. And we'll just go from there. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, so Steven, such a stance of believing something too easily without evaluating the evidence is immoral because both of the harm done to yourself and to society. I mean, that's very brief. You'd have to expand upon the point a little bit. First of all, make sure that you're clearly stating this definition. A credulous character is a person who will believe things that are not based on sufficient evidence. And an example that he gives of such a person is like the ship owner. Now, why would anybody believe something that's not based on good evidence? Don't they want to have the belief be based on something that's justified? Well, probably because in such cases, the evidence doesn't show what they hope is true. So they're just going against the evidence because it points towards a conclusion that they don't prefer. So why is it bad, though, to believe things just because you hope they're true instead of looking at evidence that shows that they're probably true? Well, it's because it can do harm both to yourself and to others. Self-harm, social harm. You could read the text and you can see his references there. He talks about how a person who has belief that's not justified can make poor and unwise, foolish decisions like the ship owner makes. You set yourself up to not be able to process information that is uncomfortable. You can't face uncomfortable truths or follow evidence wherever it leads. So this makes you a poor judge of truth and falsity. And if that's something bad for you, it makes you a poor judge of facts, then it also can influence other people and spread the tendency to others. And so you'll see specific quotes about this in the book from his essay, like where he says on page 51, nor is that truly a belief at all which has not some influence upon the actions of him who holds it. If a belief is not realized immediately in open deeds, it is stored up for the guidance of the future. No real belief, however trifling and fragmentary it may seem, is ever truly insignificant. It prepares us to receive more of its like, confirms those which resembled it before, and weakens others. So, no man's belief is in any case a private matter which concerns himself alone. Our lives are guided by the general conception of the course of things which has been created by society for social purposes. So our words, phrases, forms, and processes and modes of thought are common property, an heirloom which every successive generation inherits as a precious deposit and a sacred trust to be handed on to the next one. So you'll see that on 51 and 2, a little discussion. And anyway, so that's the harm. It's self-harm and social harm. Obviously, you're not going to be able to figure out what's true and false if every time something looks unpleasant to you, you ignore the evidence for it and instead just choose to believe something that is contrary to evidence. Like, for example, do you really want to feel better about not having like a tough diagnosis medically, so you refuse to accept the diagnosis and you just try and ignore the evidence? It'd be better for you to take it head on so that you can actually take corrective actions. And examples like that kind of generalize. Okay, so the other question I guess that you asked here, Stephen, was about 31. What is that? That says, describe an action that's morally obligatory according to one ethical theory and morally impermissible according to another. Okay, so first of all, what are two ethical theories that we studied? Let me know that. We did study two, and so this I think would be easy enough to tell me. The two ethical theories evaluated in our class. Okay, utilitarianism and the ethics of Kant, Kantian ethics. That's right. So what the question asks is, you provide an example of one action that those two theories would not agree about. So like one of them would say, this is something that you are obligated to do. And then the other one would say, based on your example, that that same action is something that it is not okay to do. So a good way of generating such an example is to think of a situation where if you do an action, it's going to create a lot of utility, but maybe it'll use someone as a means, or it'll violate the categorical imperative in some other way. So that would be a situation where it's obligatory to the utilitarian and wrong according to the Kantian. So give me such an example. Think of something. Think of some situation. It's hypothetical. You're creating it. But in this hypothetical situation, or it could be a realistic situation that happens to people, but just for the moment, you're just making it up. So what do you think would be an action that if somebody took this action, the two moral theories would diverge? And one would say that's what you must do, and the other would say that's something that you should never do. This is question 31, Alex. It says, describe an action that's morally obligatory according to one ethical theory and morally impermissible according to another. So the two ethical theories that we know of are utilitarianism and Kantianism. So you have to give one action, an example of an action, which the two theories, based on their principles, would not classify in the same moral category. So what's such an example? We've talked about examples of actions like this, but you can also freestyle one if you're able to think about the concept and just apply it. So tell me what could be such a case. An action obligated by one of the theories and forbidden by the other one. So let's hear it. Okay, well, you're saying Amanda, slavery or torture of a person. You have to give a little more detail, though. How could slavery or torture create the most overall utility? So presumably slavery hurts the slave, of course, and torture, of course, hurts the victim of torture. So how could, you have to spin off an example where somehow that type of action creates utility. Okay, so like you have to give a little more detail than that, but you're on the right track. That type of stuff, slavery or torture, is definitely ruled out by Kant because it uses someone in a way that does not treat them as an end, but rather as a means. But you still have to give an example where that action could at least theoretically be considered obligatory within the context of the example. So it's not enough to just say slavery. You have to talk about how possibly, I guess, slavery could generate some value or some kind of pleasure for others. But go ahead. Okay, so Dimitri, here's what you're saying. You're giving this car crash example. It's close, but not quite. Because in the car crash example, Kant does not say that you're obligated to attend to the person. He just says that it's not immoral because it doesn't violate the categorical imperative. Things that are not necessarily impermissible don't necessarily have to be obligatory. So that's one case of an action that's permissible, but Kant doesn't say that you have a duty to assist, just that it's not wrong if you do, even if it produces negative consequences. Stephen, you go over the trolley problem case. Yes. Okay, so, but no, a little bit problematic. You give the case of the trolley. In the trolley situation, arguably when the five die, when the five die, they're being killed by, if it's the bystander example, they're being killed by the trolley and not the bystander themselves. So I would think you should maybe rather use the case of transplant if that was the one that you were thinking of. Large man on the trolley problem. Everyone says that this man being pushed off the bridge is wrong. So that's not necessarily, I guess if you're a very hardcore utilitarian, then you could sort of ignore the fact that there's a rights violating means of diverting the threat in that case. I think the best example you could think of would be like something like a transplant scenario. So in that case, you're using someone as a means, right, to an end, to save other lives. But of course, it creates more utility than if you fail to do it. I guess you could use this man on the bridge example, a case where really intense utilitarian might say, well, if you take the action which leads to the one death but prevents 5 others, then there's more total lives saved through the action than declining to do it. But of course, in that case, again, we can say that the person's used as a means, and that would make it wrong according to Kant. And Dimitri, you say, but Kant would say you had good intentions, so it was valid. Right, but the question, if you read it specifically, says one action that's obligatory. Obligatory means it's mandatory instead of optional. And although Kant doesn't say it's wrong or immoral to help this person in the situation given, it's not that it's obligatory either. Okay, Noah, torture in order to gain information, that's a fair example too. Suppose that you had a detainee in custody. This is the famous ticking time bomb scenario that is sometimes given by those that are like apologists for aggressive interrogation tactics that some call torture. Well, suppose that you had a person in custody, and I don't know, you know for a fact that they are aware of the whereabouts of like an explosive device that would kill a lot of people unless it's detected and, defused within a short amount of time. Some would argue that in a case like that, if torture is applied to the detainee, then that would result in the disclosure of the whereabouts of the bomb. And even if that's abusive, dehumanizing, treating the person as a means to the end of providing this information that will save other lives, a utilitarian could, in theory, say, well, that's a good thing, because if we didn't torture, then more people would be harmed. So on balance, more total happiness is generated, even if you account for the torture applied to one person by doing so. But Kant would say it's never okay to treat a human being as a means to an end, no matter how much benefit you could get from it, because of how much dignity and absolute respect just humanity deserves. Now, another possible way of taking this question is to go in the opposite direction, where the Kantian would say you are obligated to do something, but the utilitarian would say that action's wrong. So, like, for example, Kant says you're morally obligated and it's your duty to tell the truth in every situation, no matter what. So suppose that you were trying to lie in order to save someone's life. Like you have an assailant that's trying to track that person down, and you're hiding them in your house, and the assailant says, tell me the truth. Is this person hiding in your house? Yes or no? Now, what are you supposed to say right there? Kant would say that you cannot universalize the maxim of lying for someone's benefit, because that would make lying the universal rule instead of the exception. And in that case, lies wouldn't work because no one would expect them to be true. So Kant would say you must tell the truth to this person giving chase, to the victim. But of course, the utilitarian would say telling the truth in this instance will probably result in their death or capture or whatever. But lying would be much better for everyone's happiness. So there's another possible case. Shopkeeper scenario, not really, Ryan, because the shopkeeper scenario doesn't show a difference in one action from two moral theories. In the shopkeeper scenario, all that we are told is that if your intention behind giving the fair price is self-interest or pleasure, then that doesn't have moral credit or value. But I mean, I guess if you're very, very detailed, you could argue that a utilitarian would say that, let me think, how could I run that one? It's the same action in both cases, though. So this doesn't really, I don't know. Yeah, so telling the fair price is not considered impermissible in either of the two theories. But I guess you could say that it's better to do it for pleasure if you're a utilitarian, because then it feels good, as opposed to the case where you do it strictly from the motive of duty. But let's just leave that out. That one's too difficult to try and perfectly present. That's really given instead as a gauge of the intuition that the motive behind a moral action has to be strictly duty instead of mixed together with pleasure or self-interest. Anyways, we've given some examples. The basic format of such a question, if it were selected, is to present one action that the two theories evaluate differently based on their moral principles. Okay, so it could be an action where the utility is generated, but it treats someone as a means. Or it could be an action where it's you're following your duty, but doing that does not generate as much utility as not following your moral duty. Okay, so anyway, let's go on to the next. What's your next question if you have a next one? That was 19 and 31 that we've gone through so far. So you'll just direct me and everybody to your next question. I have no questions. I figure it's just on you, so just throw them out there. Okay, so I see a couple coming. Stephen, we've had a few of yours, so let me get back to you. But then Brian, you mentioning 29, and Julia, you say 17. So let's try and take care of those if we can. Okay, so 29, both versions of the categorical imperative. Run it back. What are they? Kant, Immanuel Kant, moral philosopher. He says that we have to follow the moral law. The moral law is revealed by reason when we apply the categorical imperative to our behavior. There are two versions of the categorical imperative. So just tell me what one or two of them are, and maybe you can explain how they work, or we'll all do that together. But first of all, let's see you try and formulate the principle. What is the categorical imperative? Okay, version 1, Stephen. Act always so that the maxim which describes your action could be willed to be a universal law. Yes, that's the first version of the categorical imperative. Further discussion and comment follows the definition. You can't just verbatim write the definition and think, okay, well, someone said that's the definition, so I'm done. No, you have to explain it too. So that's part of it, but we'll go into the explanation next. And the second one also, Stephen, we should never treat human beings as a means to an end, but always as an end in itself or themselves. Yes. Okay, so what's the first one saying? It says that when you do actions, you have to consider what maxim you're behaving based on. A maxim is a person's policy statement or principle of action when they do something. And it generally takes the form that I will do a certain action under certain type of circumstances. Like, for example, I will go to a class lecture when the class is scheduled. Well, what the categorical imperative says is consider what it would be if the maxim that you're using was to become the universal law that was applied with no exceptions to all people in the same situation. So I will attend class when it's in session becomes all people will attend class when it's in session. Then the only question is, would that be possible? And would that be not undesirable? And that example is fine because there's nothing really impossible about everyone going to their duly scheduled classes, etc. But some actions fail this test, and those are the ones that the moral law says are forbidden. Like, I don't know, if I was to make a lying promise to repay a loan, just because I want the person to give me the loan and I fully intend to, not pay it back. If my maxim is, I will lie about repaying loans when I want money, then the universal law version would be all people will lie about repaying loans when they request loans. If this were the universal law, then every lender would know that no one's going to pay them back and they wouldn't give loans. So the liar about the loan repayment does not want this to be a universal law, otherwise their own action would no longer succeed. So anyway, that's the way that you think of the first categorical imperative. Imagine actions elevated to the status of a universal law, and then question whether it would be either logically inconsistent or undesirable for that. If so, it's wrong. If not, it's okay. Second version of the categorical imperative says never use a person as a means to an end. So an end, if you can remember, is a goal, and means are the things that you do to achieve or to accomplish the goals. So that just says that you're not supposed to deal with human beings as though they were things to manipulate in the pursuit of a goal that you have got. Okay, so you're supposed to treat people like they're the goal themselves. So like, I don't know, if you involve someone in an interaction that they wouldn't consent to, then you're using them for some purpose that they themselves don't agree with or that they haven't chosen. Like in the case of rape, a victim of rape is obviously not consent to the act. And in that case, the attacker is using the person as a means to their own whatever weird sexual pervert pleasures. So you understand that that's wrong to do because it uses a human being as a means instead of giving them choices about what they would like to do. And if I steal from somebody, the victim has been used as a means to the pursuit of my own enrichment. But a human being is not an ATM, nor like a receptacle for you to use for any purpose, but rather it's a human whose will and rationality must be respected. So people are not to be used as means, rather as ends. Well, when they're treated as ends, they're not used. So I guess I shouldn't use that verb when I talk about what we are supposed to treat other human beings like. It's not using anyone. It's respecting them as an end in themselves. Okay, so two versions of the categorical imperative. Only act on maxims that could be universal laws. Never treat people as means. Examples and discussion of both would then follow. Okay, so let's go on. What's next? Okay, I saw Julia says 17. An objection to Pascal's wager. Okay. First of all, what did Pascal's wager say? Blaise Pascal, his book, Pensées from 1669, he argues that no one can prove whether God exists because it's just beyond the power of the mind to prove or disprove. But despite this, he says, we know for a fact that he either exists or does not. Like one of these two cases must be true. So we are then put in a position to wager on the question without having proof either way. So it's kind of like a coin flip. It could land on one of two sides, heads or tails. You don't know which one, but you're going to bet either way. So he says if you have to wager or bet on the question of whether God exists, what should you choose? What's the bet that has the best risk to reward ratio or reward to risk ratio? Well, believing in God doesn't seem to have much risk. It's all possible upside with no real downside. Because what if you're right? You go to heaven. What if you're wrong? Nothing. If you don't believe in God, though, there's basically no upside and all downside. Suppose you're right, you get nothing. But if you're wrong, you lose the infinite rewards of heaven, or even worse, be sent to hell. So if you compare the two bets, he's just saying that one of them holds potential benefit with no risk, and the other one holds a lot of risk with no potential gain. So if you are risk averse and you're forced to wager either way, you might as well just choose to believe. What do you have to lose? Nothing. What do you have to gain? Everything. So it's just wise to do that. That's why he's saying it's smart to believe even if you can't prove it. Well, what are objections to that? Okay, so who could tell me what are some of the authors and the ideas that were mentioned in the class as criticisms of Pascal's wager? You could let me know. There's definitely at least two authors that we discussed in conjunction with the wager as objections, as critics. So what do you think? Someone will tell me. Going back against the wager, we have these type of authors. Who, for example? I know you're familiar with that because many of you guys wrote about that in your papers and stuff. Yeah, go ahead. You're the leader. Lead. Tell us. Who said that? Okay, Alex. That is believing something that's not based on sufficient evidence. So who said that it was wrong to do that? Okay, so Clifford did. Clifford said that believing in something without sufficient evidence is unethical. Yeah, he said that. And so keep in mind, Pascal is a person who says you should believe even though there's no evidence that could prove this question. You should believe just because hopefully you'll be right. Clifford says it's wrong to believe based off of hope. You should only believe based on sufficient evidence that indicates the thing's likely to be true. He gives a case of a ship owner. He says if the ship owner knows well that the ship is dangerously unsafe, but he just hopes that it'll work out in his favor and lets it sail based on the hope instead of the evidence, then whether the ship sinks or not, that was a wrong thing to do because it was a risk that he put at people's lives. So the principle that he generates from the example, the moral, is don't believe things without sufficient evidence. It's not okay. It's going to make you a credulous character. And so Pascal says believing God without evidence, that's wrong. Okay, now who else said something against Pascal? Or at least it can be construed as an objection to Pascal. We have Clifford, so good. What's another objection, just so that we have options here? Yeah, Robert McKim, Eric, he did talk about the hiddenness of God and how those disadvantages of his hiddenness are not ideal. But let's try and make sure that we're clear about what the connection is between the wager and whatever McKim has said. McKim just goes into this elaborate discussion of how God is, he's not out in the open where you could just look and see him like me or you, or the moon or whatever. So the five senses don't have the ability to just perceive God in the ordinary everyday sense. But, anyway, people say that you should believe in God even though we don't have this ability to perceive him or observe him. Now, McKim says it's kind of strange. If God actually does exist and he just chooses to stay hidden from us, so he won't reveal himself in a way that makes it obvious to us that he exists, then maybe he's not even concerned or interested in the question, do people believe in me or not? And so McKim poses that as a possibility, that the hiddenness of God raises doubt as to whether he even cares that you believe in him. So suppose God didn't care whether you believed in him, as McKim has suggested. Then, in that case, there would no longer be any fear of disbelief in God, because it wouldn't necessarily be the basis upon which God decides whether you're going to be punished or rewarded anyway. He would have to care about whether you believe to want to reward you for doing it or to punish you for not doing it. So, absent the assumption, delete the assumption that God cares whether you believe in him or not, and the wager no longer has any stakes. So there's no longer any motivation behind wanting to choose which side to believe in, if that's true. Now, Stephen, you say Everett with his scientific evidence and how the world is an inapt presentation of God's world. Sort of, yeah. I mean, in a way, you could look at that and say that when Everett argues there really is evidence there's no God. If you just look at science, it contradicts everything that you would have assumed had this universe been created for human beings by a divine being. So I guess you could argue that, contrary to what Pascal argues at the beginning, that there's no way of proving either way, that perhaps there actually is evidence on the side that God doesn't exist. If so, then that might push back against his initial assertion that this thing could never be proved or disproved. Okay. So what else can we talk about next? I guess, Stephen, you asked about 33 above. So why does Mr. Peter Singer think that the problem of global hunger is not really necessarily about scarcity of the available resources? Since you asked about 33, that would be the question there. Going back to Peter Singer and his article, Rich and Poor, he gave certain reasons why he thought that the objection that global hunger is inevitable and cannot be prevented. Some would say that it is inevitable because there's just not going to be enough food for all these different people that we have on the world and in the global population. So how does he reply to that? Does he just say, I guess, never mind, we can't do anything. Too many people, not enough food, so there'll never be a solution. Why does he think that's not true? That there could be enough food, or that it's not necessarily just about scarcity? Well, if it's not about scarcity, what does he think it is about? What is the basic reason, then, he thinks, why we can't get enough food to all the people that are hungry and starving? He gives two main factors which I think you can point out as to what the real issue behind global hunger is. Not scarcity, not so much scarcity of resources, but rather what? Okay, so Julia, you say, not a problem of scarcity, but rather poor distribution and waste. Yes. So Claire, you're adding detail, which is great. You add that the resources that we use on raising livestock could be used to feed people directly. And that's true. So he says one thing is we have a lot of inefficiency and maldistribution and waste just because of our over-reliance on animal agriculture, which results in a loss of efficiency in the net amount of consumable resources that we could give to people. We basically expend a lot of consumable resources rearing and raising these livestock, etc., for market-based consumption. And also, there's the issue of waste, that we throw away a lot of food in the West that goes to the landfill. So if we wasted less and we're more frugal in our consumer choices and maybe ate a little less meat, he does argue, and some research shows, that there would be a net available amount of food that could feed more people than we even have right now. So he says, no, it's not that there's not enough resources or that there could not, in theory, be enough. It has to do with the way that we consume and waste and the things that we consume and the industrial processes that we use to produce those things. Okay, so maldistribution and waste. Think of animal agriculture and the loss of efficiency that results in, and the fact that we throw away and buy a lot of food that we don't need. Okay, so we can go on from there. What's next for you? Anytime, you just let me know. I also don't mind if you don't have any questions. We could just hang out. But it's your time, so we can fill it however you want. But it gets a little awkward after a while. Long silence. You got to say something. I mean, I assume you have questions, right? Or maybe you don't. You just, what are my plans for my birthday? Grading. Teaching and grading. I don't have anything. I have to just, finish work that I'm doing. But about that too, guys, I'm replying to all the emails. Thank you guys for your requests for your grades. I've gotten through all the submissions of requests that I received until about noon on Monday. But those people that did send me things on Monday, don't worry, I'm getting back to you guys today. I just have to scan all these pages, and I have I have like 2 other intro classes at Cal State Fullerton with a lot of students. So it just takes a while to go through them all, scan the photos, and send them out. But I send you full written comments with a photo of the scanned pages themselves, just if you're still waiting, but not to worry. Okay, so then let's see. Nicole, you say 36. Response to 2 of the differences between killing and failing to assist. Okay, we can cover that. 24. Mills claim that happiness is the only thing we pursue as an end and not as a means. Okay, so let's see if we can cover the 2. Number 36, Peter Singer's response to 2 of the mentioned differences between killing and failing to assist. Okay, so with Peter Singer, he says, since we have extra money in the first world that we just spend on things that are not necessary but just desired wants, and there's a lot of people in the world that don't even have enough money to eat, sleep, or have clothes, have a place to sleep, have food, and have clothes on their back. Why couldn't we divert some of the additional resources from our surplus wealth to the third world, prevent some absolute poverty, and it wouldn't really hurt us too much in any significant way? It'd be a minor sacrifice, really. He says, if we're not willing to do that, does that make us like a killer because you're withholding aid that would have saved lives? How is that different from going out and actually killing people? Well, having raised the question, he then mentions, well, there are differences between killing and failing to assist, fair enough. But even though there are these differences, after he mentions what they are, I think he gives 5 mentioned differences, he goes back through them and says, well, even though there's these differences, they do not eliminate all the wrongness from failure to assist. So even if killing is different from failing to assist, and maybe, yes, it's worse, that doesn't excuse completely the failure to assist. So what are some of the differences? Who could tell me what some of those differences were as we're looking at question 24? So differences between killing and failing to assist. Guys, who could throw out some of the items on that list? Different blank, identifiability of the blank. You can always say blah, blah, blah. So help me finish out those statements. Once we have said what the differences are claimed to be, then we can report on Singer's rebuttal. Okay, Stephen, killing is easy to avoid. Saving lives through aid is hard. One difference. Good. What else? That's 1 out of 5. So degree of difficulty of the two stated obligations. Don't kill people, so easy. Go save people, not so easy. So there's one difference. What else? Okay, Stephen. Killing has a malicious intent, but motivation of self-interest is involved when we don't assist. That's right. So different motive, another point. The killer's motive, consider, for example, this guy that was shooting people in Atlanta yesterday. Disgusting thing to do, of course, evil. That's bad. That's very bad. That's the worst. But if you and I, let's say, pass up an opportunity to give to charity and just withhold and give the money to ourselves instead and spend on ourselves, that's not motivated by a desire for people to have their lives end. It's motivated by the self-interest of getting the thing. You mentioned Eric next. Those who die from failure to assist cannot have a specific perpetrator identified. That's good also, Eric. So the identifiability of the victim. With killing, the killer kills particular people whose identities are known, and it is known for a fact that those people's lives have ended specifically because of the actions taken by the killer. But when you decline to give aid, we cannot connect that declining of aid to a specific death somewhere in the third world due to starvation or whatever. So identifiability of so-called victims is different. When we fail to assist, whether or not anyone suffers or starves, we cannot link that to a particular person's inaction. That's different when one acts to kill. Then you've said, Julia, difference in certainty of the outcome. Another point, yeah. A person who goes forth to kill, sad to say, but we have seen this and we continue to see it. A person that's got the means and the motive to do that is highly likely to cause death or injury with a high degree of certainty. But when you fail to assist, there's more room to doubt whether that really hurts anybody, because maybe the aid wouldn't have helped anyone, or maybe it would have been wasted on different expenses by the aid agency or whatever. So the level of certainty that anyone comes to harm is much different. When a person goes out with a high-powered weapon and set to their mind that they're going to harm or kill people, very likely that something bad and harmful will happen, but when you fail to assist, not so sure. And isn't there one more? It was about, you can always say it's not my fault that people are poor in the third world, but no similar type of claim that you're absolved of responsibility could possibly be given in the case of killing. So the point there is that poor people in Hungary already existed before you were born, and you didn't cause it to exist in this universe, in this world. So why should you be responsible for taking care of that problem if you didn't cause it? But had you killed people, it would definitely be your personal responsibility to face full accountability for that. So those are 5 differences: motive, certainty, identifiability of victim, difficulty of living up to the 2 obligations, and whether or not you're responsible for problems that you didn't cause. Now, what is his reply to the differences? The question 24 asks you to mention how Singer rebuts these points. And so he has a series of different rebuttals. I'll talk to you about what all of them are, I guess, so that we can just cover all the bases. First of all, he says, although the motivation is different, that maybe makes it that killing is worse, but it doesn't erase all the wrongness from failure to assist. So as an example, he says, when a person gets behind the wheel drunk, that's not quite as certain that it's going to hurt people as if they got behind the wheel trying to drive into people on purpose, like a maniac homicidal driver using the car as a weapon. So the motive of the homicidal driver is a way worse motive than the drunk driver, but the drunk driver still getting behind the wheel knows that they're doing something irresponsible that could increase the risk for some people to face. So it's still wrong, even though for sure going behind the wheel with the intention to hit people would be even worse. And therefore, when you fail to assist, even if you're not trying to hurt people, as the killer is, You know, I guess, that this adds to the degree of risk that some individuals in the world will face, so that makes it wrong enough. Certainty of the outcome, same kind of example. The murderous driver, it's much likelier that they're going to hurt people than the inebriated drunk driver. But even though it's more certain that the murderous driver will cause death or injury, that doesn't mean that it's okay to drive drunk. It's still bad because it increases the risk of such bad things happening, even if it's not quite as certain as if you're literally trying to make it happen. So in the same way, you fail to assist, who knows if that's really going to hurt people? It's certainly not as likely as if you were trying to on purpose, but it makes more risk exist, and therefore it's also wrong for that reason. Not my fault they're poor. He says two things. Are you sure? I mean, maybe it's not your individual fault, right? But if you're a member of a group that is a beneficiary of, I don't know, unjust practices in the past of like colonial economic exploitation, then maybe we stand here today as those that have profited and benefited from unjustly gotten gains. Therefore, maybe some argue that we have a larger historical injustice to correct in this present time. Some people don't agree with that, though, and he says, if you don't think we bear any indirect responsibility for the haves and have-nots in the world, then just think of it as a utilitarian would, and a utilitarian doesn't care who caused the problem, just whether or not you can make it better or create more happiness right now. So those are some points in reaction to that difference. And then the thing about identifiability of the victim, he gives this example of like a person who sells a product that doubles the risk that someone's going to get stomach cancer. Suppose that selling this product, someone then comes down with stomach cancer, returns to the vendor and says, this is wrong because you caused this. Maybe he could say to the person, I don't know, maybe I caused it, but at the same time, who can say? It doubles the risk, but just because it doubled the risk, maybe you got it from somewhere else, and it's just a false indicator that you took my product before that. In the same way, I guess you could say that someone who wears no mask, and then later on someone that came into contact with them gets coronavirus, because they found out that that person had coronavirus. They're like, I had direct exposure to you while you were sick and you wore no mask. Now I'm sick with corona and it's your fault. They might say, I don't know, maybe it's my fault, but you might have been lucky and you didn't get it from me, and then you got it from someone else that you interacted with later in the day. Does this excuse his irresponsible behavior just because we can't prove who his victims are? Again, no. So the same point would hold with no aid. When you don't give aid, we can't say who it is in the world that suffers because of that, but doesn't it still lead to additional risk in some larger sense, and therefore it's wrong enough just on that basis? So I think that covered all the replies. The question doesn't ask you about each and every one. It asks about his reply to two of them, but based on the grab bag of concepts and examples there, I guess you have all the choices and options that you could need. So we can then, I guess, move to Stephen, you wanted to talk about question 24, I guess, and that is explain Mill's claim that happiness is the only thing we pursue as an end and not as a means. Okay, so remind me again of what those terms refer to. Terms end and means. What are those two things? I know it's clear enough. I think we talked about it a few times. So by now, you'll probably be able to tell me. Okay, so Stephen, by end, you say Mill means, but it's not just Mill, it's just the word what it means in the ethical context. I guess end also means like the final part of something, the end of the movie. But in the ethical sense, an end is like a goal. So anyway, by end, Mill means the intended result, goal, or objective. And means are the actions taken or methods pursued to achieve your goals. Okay, correct. So maybe you have a goal of wealth or something. And maybe if you have that goal, one means to it is you have to get a career. And if you want the career, a means to that is a degree. And if you want the degree, a means to that is enrolling in these classes and getting certain grades in them. So when you think about the structure of your life, it's organized in terms of goals that you want and things that you must do or try to do to get there. So when he says that happiness is the only thing that we pursue as an end and not as a means, he's simply saying, in other words, that the only thing that is our goal is happiness and pleasure. Nothing else is the goal. Everything else in life that you want, why do you want it? Because you think it is a stepping stone or a method to use to get to the happiness, which is the real goal. Like, why do you want money? Why do you want to have a relationship? Why do you want friends? Why do you want possessions? Because you think that they're fun, because you think they make you happy, they put a smile on your face to give you pleasure. Why else would you want to do them? So everything that you do is in the pursuit of personal happiness and pleasure. And he says, if that is true for each individual person, then pleasure seems to be the good that we all seek, and therefore maximizing it would be the right way to live according to your ethical principles. Okay, so just consider why you do everything you do, and you'll see that behind it all is the large pursuit of happiness and pleasure. Maybe it doesn't strike you that way in the moment. You're like, oh, I'm writing this essay, and this essay is so stressful. This is not making me happy. Certainly some of the steps that you have to take to get to the goal are not necessarily fun. Like when you're working out and you're like, man, this is making me sore. I'm not exactly enjoying the process because it's very painful and it's laborious and it takes time and a lot of hard effort that I'm not necessarily, finding fun in the moment. Some people like that kind of stuff anyway, but many others will say, I'm just doing it because I know it makes me healthy. I'm doing it because I know it makes me more, competitive in a sport or something that's going to provide other types of rewards. So everything you do, even if not each step on the way, is done in the pursuit of your ambition towards personal happiness and pleasure. So if that's what each one seeks, then the universalization and maximization of it is where Mill thinks we should set the bar for morality. Okay, so anyway, just a little discussion of that one. And I don't know, we can take any other questions. There's about 5 minutes or so left in our class today, so we don't have a ton of time, but I think that's still enough to talk about maybe one more if you want. So let me know. Just taking a moment. And I think I mentioned to you guys that I'm going to hold that one bonus office hour tomorrow from 11:30 to 12:30. So I'll send the link for that in the morning, I think tomorrow. If anybody wanted to have one more opportunity to ask anything to me, then you can probably just come to that Zoom. And I will have a 1 hour window tomorrow to make it available for you before the exam, obviously. But yeah, just let me know. If you don't, what shall I infer from the lack of new comments in the live chat? Is it that you're now comfortable, or you feel that the amount of time remaining, you don't want to ask a question? It's okay. Let me know then. Are we done? If we're done, then let's just close early. Or if you have another question, let me know. But one way or the other, let's figure that out. Another question or done early? Going to email us the exam at 9 and have until 9:50 to email it back. That's right, yes. So you'll receive the exam form through Canvas as a sent announcement just prior to 9, so maybe 8:50 or 8:55. And then you'll have until I'll probably set it at till 10 just to give you a little bit of extra time. I don't know if that's going to mess with your schedule. If so, just finish it by 9:50, but I'll allot you a few more minutes anyway. And yeah, you'll have until about 10 o'clock to mail it back as an attached file, and that's it. Anything else? It's a good question. Feel good about the midterm? Okay, yeah, so like Brian, what I'm going to have are about 9 or 10 questions, and I think you're going to have to answer 6. That's more or less what I'm planning. No more than 7 responses, but 6 or 7, I'm probably leaning on 6. It's going to be maybe something like 6 out of 9 or 6 out of 10. So out of 9 options, it'll say choose 6 of these or something like that. Okay? All right, cool, guys. Well, I guess we've done enough of our review for the moment. And like I said, if anyone needs any extra stuff, how long your responses have to be? What's an hour divided by 6? 10 minutes long. Try and write the longest and most detailed answer that you can. My criteria is completeness and accuracy. So you can have an answer that's fully complete but inaccurate. You can have an answer that's fully accurate, meaning it's capturing exactly what the author said, but it's missing some information. That would be accurate but incomplete. And so your best case scenario is to have it cover everything that the author said, leaving nothing out, fully complete, and not misrepresenting or misstating anything that the author originally said, and that's fully accurate. Each question is going to be scored on a 0 to 4 point scale, with 4 representing like a A, 3, B, 2, C, 1, D, 0, no credit. And so there will also be intermediate point values to account for plus and minus grade points. So 3.7 would be like an A minus answer. You're essentially therefore reaching for 4s on each of your questions. And it's not like an all or nothing thing. It's on a scale. So you can have a better or worse partial credit answer depending on if you miss certain things. Alex, when we email the midterm back to you, will that be through Outlook or Canvas? My preference is that it be emailed to me as a new email that you compose, which you type in my address, vulich@chapman.edu. But I do believe that Canvas will allow you to submit it through Canvas. It's just that sometimes that delivery system is less reliable than just normal email. So my request, and I'll say this in the message, is that you simply send me an email. And for each submission that I receive, I will confirm it by sending you a quick reply that says thanks and I've got your exam. So make sure that you get that confirmation so that you know there were no issues with your delivery. And you can, send it as a PDF, Word file, Google Doc, Pages. I'm willing to accept any format as long as I can easily open it and that there's no restrictions on my access to it. Okay. So I guess that's about it. We can continue with other questions through email if you have them, and maybe tomorrow at the office hour that I'm going to have. But then, okay, guys, for now, I guess I'll let you guys go. We've reached pretty much the end of class time. So thanks, everybody. I'm not going to be doing much today on my birthday, just a lot more teaching. But it's nice to spend it with you guys in the morning. So take care, good luck, and I'll see you back then, or I'll talk to you guys in the next few days as we get the midterm going, okay? Thanks again, and have a good one. Bye-bye.